Welcome to channel. Today video we will talk about outbreak and fatalities of Great Plague of Marseille. This great outburst of plague was the last recurrence of a pandemic of bubonic plague, following the devastating episodes which began in the early 14th century. The first known instance of bubonic plague in Marseille was the arrival of the Black Death in the autumn of 1347. In 1720, Yersinia pestis arrived at the port of Marseille from the Levant upon the merchant ship Grand Saint-Antoine. The vessel had departed from Sidon in Lebanon, having previously called at Smyrna, Tripoli, and plague-ridden Cyprus. A Turkish passenger was the first to be infected and soon died, followed by several crew members and the ship's surgeon. The ship was refused entry to the port of Livorno. When it arrived at Marseille, it was promptly placed under quarantine in the lazaret by the port authorities due largely to Marseille's monopoly on French trade with the Levant. This important port had a large stock of imported goods in warehouses. It was also expanding its trade with other areas of the Middle East and emerging markets in the New World. Powerful city merchants wanted the silk and cotton cargo of the ship for the great medieval fair at Caire and pressured authorities to lift the quarantine. A few days later, the disease broke out in the city. Hospitals were quickly overwhelmed, and residents panicked, driving the sick from their homes and out of the city. Mass graves were dug but were quickly filled. Eventually the number of dead overcame city public health efforts, until thousands of corpses lay scattered and in piles around the city. Attempts to stop the spread of plague included an act of the Parliament of Aix that levied the death penalty for any communication between Marseille and the rest of Provence. To enforce this separation, a plague wall, or mur de la peste, was erected across the countryside. The wall was built of dry stone, 2 meters high and 70 centimeters thick, with guard posts set back from the wall. Remains of the wall can still be seen in different parts of the Plateau de Vaucluse. At the onset of the plague, Nicolas Rose, who had been vice-consul at a factory on the Peloponnese coast and dealt against epidemics there, proposed his services to the local authorities, the Echevens. Strong with his experience from Greece, he was made General Commissioner for the Rive-Neuve neighborhood. He established a quarantine by setting up checkpoints, and went as far as building gallows as a deterrence against looters. He also had 5 large mass graves dug out, converted La Corderie into a field hospital, and organized distribution of humanitarian supply to the population. He furthermore organized supply for the city itself. On the 16th of September 1720, Rose personally headed a 150-strong group of volunteers and prisoners to remove 1,200 corpses in the poor neighborhood of the Esplanade de la Tourette. Some of the corpses were 3 weeks old, and contemporary sources describe them as hardly human in shape and set in movement by maggots. In half an hour, the corpses were thrown into open pits that were then filled with lime and covered with soil. Out of 1,200 volunteers and prisoners deployed to fight the plague, only 3 survived. Rose himself caught the disease, but survived, although chances of survival without modern medicine are between 20 and 40%. During a 2-year period, 50,000 of Marseille's total population of 90,000 died. An additional 50,000 people in other areas succumbed as the plague spread north, eventually reaching Aix-en-Provence, Arles, Apt, and Toulon. Estimates indicate an overall death rate of between 25% to 50% for the population in the larger area, with the city of Marseille at 40%. The area of Toulon at above 50%, and the area of Aix and Arles at 25%. After the plague subsided, the royal government strengthened the plague defences of the port, building the waterside lazaret de Rink. A double line of 15-foot walls ringed the whitewashed compound, pierced on the waterside to permit the offloading of cargo from lighters. Merchantmen were required to pass inspection at an island further out in the harbor, where crews and cargoes were examined.
Press the bell icon on the YouTube app and never miss another update.